This episode features Carnarvon Gorge and Lake Nuga Nuga National Parks. As there is no camping in the gorge, except on school holidays when it's packed out, the only option was to stay at one of the 3 commercial resorts near the entrance to the park. My camping setup is for bush camping and not suited to close proximity of caravan parks. I chose Takarakka Bush Resort as it seemed to have plenty of options, from glamping cabins to the sardine tins of squares of concrete and dirt just metres apart, and everything in between. But I did want to see the gorge, so with some trepidation I started the 40-kilometre drive in from the highway on the fully sealed roads that gave some nice views of the Sandstone ridges. The first stop on the way in was the crash site of the C-47 Dakota aircraft in 1943 that resulted in the death of all on board. The local scouts have built a memorial, which is good as it stops the looters and vandals that seem drawn to these sites. I turned into the Takarakka Resort and across the creek into beautiful kept gardens. The staff were very friendly and helpful, and the general store sold basic items. They have a bar and a happy hour every night and 2 roast dinners a week in the prime season. They offer tours and each night have an information session about the gorge. The facilities are excellent, very clean and neat. I was looking forward to a hot shower. I mentioned to check-in I'd prefer a site with some privacy, which was good as I'd been allocated a sardine can concrete site. They happily put me in a large site with some foliage screens and kept the sites beside me deliberately free. Considering the location and services provided, the cost was reasonable, but much more than staying in a park. Taka has its own lookout walk. It's not far, only several hundred metres, and a pleasant, if not spectacular view. Despite the park being quite full, no one else came up there in the time I spent there. The second walk at the resort is along Carnarvon Creek. There is a nice sandy beach and clear, cold water, and amazingly, only a couple of hundred metres down the creek from the swimming hole, there are platypus. The wildlife here is so used to humans, they are very easy to see and photograph. There were ever-present kookaburras, grey-fronted honeyeaters, satin flycatchers, Australasian figbirds, and of course sulphur-crested cockatoos and lorikeets. A huge tree on the creek bank had some fig-like fruit growing on it, and the birds were having a feast. A tough-looking lorikeet started an interspecies competition as to who could hit the human taking photos on the head the most times with discarded fig husks. The fig birds and lorikeets started off with gusto. However, the sulphur-crested cockatoos won out with both volume and accuracy before resorting to dropping entire branches of uneaten fruit. For a change, this apostle bird had absolutely nothing to say. Good morning, another glorious morning here at Carnarvon Gorge. I'm making my way down to the balloon cave
So I did see my platypuses last night, but the little biters didn't come out till after dark, so the images were not much chop. Anyway, let's see what today brings. This is Balloon Cave at Carnarvon Gorge, a indigenous art site. It's a pleasant walk in here through some nice bushland, and you'll see in the following photos there's some stencil artwork on the cliff face behind me. So a pleasant walk, and there's quite a few others to do this morning. This is the rock pool at Carnarvon Gorge. And once again, I got a glimpse of a platypus, but not fast enough to get any images of it. But, very pretty place, still quite early in the morning, and I'll explore around here a bit, and there's still quite a few more walks to do in the gorge.
Eventually, the platypus returned, and while it may be difficult to get to see one and involve a little bit of luck, it is way more difficult to get a decent picture of one. The white-faced heron watched in amusement as I struggled to get the camera focused each time the platypus briefly surfaced. The rock pool walk had plenty of wildlife, and I saw two new species that I had not photographed before: shining bronze and fan-tailed cuckoos. The one with the green wing is the shining bronze. There were plenty of other finches, but they were all on speed and never sat still for more than half a second, unlike the cuckoos, who were happy to pose. My next destination was the Visitor Information Centre, which is the starting point for all the gorge walks. It was now approaching midday, and my fellow happy campers were beginning to arrive in force. There are beautiful picnic areas here and good displays at the information centre. Despite the large number of people, there are so many walks that I only saw a few other people. I did not do the longer walks deep into the gorge because it was too late in the day to start, and I was buggered from what I'd done in the morning, so I'll have to come back another time for these. Old mate Skip gave me quite a start when he popped his head up out of the long grass on the banks of Caernarfon Creek. Apart from giving me a dirty look, he was not at all concerned by my presence. The walks around the creek are all pleasant, with a lot of wildlife not too concerned by my presence. The only exception were the kingfishers, who kept their distance, unlike the king parrots, who let me approach within a couple of metres. The tracks crossed the creek multiple times, and it was a nice way to spend the afternoon.
I'm at Lake Nuga Nuga, I arrived here quite early this morning after leaving the Takarakka Bush Retreat in Carnarvon Gorge. Made my way here. It's a fairly long drive, about half of it's unpaved, and I've sent the drone up, hopefully got some good shots. It's a very peaceful place. I'm the only person here, it seems, and looking forward to my stay here.
When I sent the drone up, the wagtails were delighted to have something else to harass. This was a relief for all of the other species, in particular the young whistling kites, who the wagtails constantly dive bomb. Lake Nuga Nuga is the largest natural water body within the central Queensland Sandstone belt and provides valuable habitat for water birds in an otherwise arid sandstone landscape. Nuga Nuga National Park preserves remnants of endangered bonewood scrub and the vulnerable uline tree, which is a very slow-growing, medium-sized tree that generally grows to 10 metres high and is a relic of an extensive rainforest vegetation that once covered much of Australia. There were countless species of water birds and a large family of whistling kites. As usual, the wagtails supervised everyone and determined who was allowed to sit on particular branches. They gave the young kites much grief and moved them on if they sat for too long. The young kites still had fluffy down on their chests, but once in the air were very graceful. One young kite in particular seemed to be picked out for special attention by the wagtails and spent most of its time fearfully checking the skies above for the next dive bomb attack and calling to its parents for assistance. Way out in the centre of the lake, some raptors had a nest. When a parent returned to feed the chicks, I was walking along the shore of the lake and did not have the camera tripod. So trying to video handheld at 2000mm zoom makes it very shaky, I'm sorry. I spent a pleasant evening around my campfire, but rain was on the way. A light rain started just after sunset and continued most of the night. I was not too concerned as the rain was so light that the roads would be badly affected or that I would damage them by tearing them up driving on them in the wet. Next morning the rain had stopped and I enjoyed a beautiful sunrise over the lake. Even the wagtails seemed content to allow the kites to sit and soak up the morning sun. Heading out of the park the next morning started out okay, but sections of the track were black dirt, and even the smallest amount of water turns this into a terrible, sticky mess. It wraps around the tyres in thick pellets, sticks to anything it touches. It was a long, slow trip out as I tried to avoid damaging the track. In the next episode, I will be visiting the Mount Moffat section of Caernarfon, which is a 165 kilometre drive in from Injune and is in the southwest corner of the park.